Hello, dear viewer. I'm Fergus Fadden, your online CELTA tutor. And in this video, we're going to talk about what is grammar and indeed how to teach it. So let's get right to it. So first of all, as often, I do a little bit of research, and a lot of reading I did on this one came from this really good blog on My English Pages, What is Grammar? So I really encourage you to go and check that out. That was one of the main resources that I looked at when researching this video. So let's start by talking about a brief history of grammar. So if you go somewhere like Wikipedia, you're going to find things like, in linguistics, the grammar of a natural language. Grammar is a word that comes from ancient Greek, in fact, and it's usually a set of structural constraints on speakers or writers' compositions of clauses, phrases, and words. That's kind of like a fancy way of saying that it's the rules of speaking or writing. The term can also refer to the study of such constraints, a field that includes such things as phonology. So phonology, everything to do with sound. For practical purposes, especially in language teaching, we just refer to it as pronunciation. Morphology, so how words change. We often think about that in terms of verbs. I am, you are, he, she, it is. But it also, applies to many types of words, as when suffixes, information, informative, etc. Also syntax, and these are often complemented by phonetics. So that's another aspect of phonology. But again, for our purposes, it's just okay to think about all of that in terms of pronunciation, because we're not looking at this from linguistic point of view. We're looking at it from an applied linguistics point of view, from helping learners to actually go and use language in a communicative way. I often think about semantics. Semantics is the study of meaning. It's actually a little, on a side tangent, a little bugbear of mine when people say, oh, you're just talking semantics. And usually my response is, absolutely, I'm talking semantics, because I'm trying to get to the bottom of the meaning of what we're actually talking about. So of course, in language teaching, we often talk about MFP, meaning, form, pronunciation. And put another way, we talk about semantics, morphology, and phonology. And then also pragmatics. And we deal with pragmatics. A good way of thinking about pragmatics is, we set up all of our lessons in a context, or specifically when we teach functional language, we talk about, how the, form doesn't always equal function. The function is often dictated by the context, the tone of voice, who you're speaking to, where you're speaking, etc. There are currently two different approaches to the study of grammar. There's a traditional and a theoretical grammar. So in this video, I'm going to look at both of those, and let's first of all turn our attention to the traditional approach. So traditionally, studying language was grounded in the principles of Greek and Latin grammar. During the Renaissance era, the Greek and Roman literature were held in high regard, and Latin was taught as a language mainly for reading and writing. Mastering Latin grammar rules became an educational goal. The invention of printing machines and the development of local languages around Europe increased the need for a second or foreign language learning. Grammar was central in language teaching, and language teachers adopted the grammar translation method, which was based on traditional Latin teaching. The underlying principle of the method was that the target grammar should be described in the student's native language. Grammar was viewed as a set of rules that govern how sentences should be formed. This view about grammar has been challenged with some data. Having a set of rules that distinguish the right sentences from the wrong ones might at first glance seem to account for what grammar is all about. However, grammar is not only about the rules that distinguish the correct sentences from the incorrect sentences. And we're going to see that later on in this video. So let's move on, and before we get to some examples, let's move on and look at the theoretical view of grammar. Now, over the years, there have been quite a few frameworks of grammar which seek to give precise scientific theory for the syntactic rules of grammar and their function. And these have been developed through what's called theoretical linguistics. Now, this gentleman right here may be familiar to him. He is Noam Chomsky, one of the 20th and the 21st century's most well-renowned linguists. And he is accredited with what is known as universal grammar. And so in modern linguistics, this is a theory of the genetic component of the language faculty. The basic postulate, or the basic idea of universal grammar, sometimes just referred to as the abbreviated UG, is that a certain set of structural rules are innate to humans, independent of sensory experience. Now, this is something that is very in vogue to talk about, and maybe to some degree controversial. The idea between nature and nurture, it has been largely debunked and discredited as an idea that we are complete blank slates when we are born, and there have been there is such a thing as human nature, and this definitely goes towards that idea, the idea of universal grammar, that innate within us is a faculty for language, amongst many other things, and that's a whole other philosophical and indeed evolutionary biological discussion as well. But back to Chomsky and the universal grammar. So the idea is that with more linguistic stimuli received in the course of psychological development, children then adopt specific syntactic rules that conform to universal grammar. It's sometimes referred to as mental grammar and stands contrasted with other grammars, for example, prescriptive, descriptive, and pedagogical. The advocates of this theory emphasize and partially rely on the poverty of a stimulus, POS, argument, and the existence of some universal properties of natural human languages. However, the latter has not been firmly established, as some linguists have argued languages are so diverse that such universality is rare. It is a matter of empirical investigation to determine precisely what properties are universal and what linguistic capacities are innate. So, from what I said, it's clear which side, I fall on that discussion. I focusing very deeply on the perceived differences on languages, for me, can kind of miss the wood from the trees. And what I mean by that is that, we all speak languages, and we just automatically speak languages. You don't learn them. We tend to use that word, you acquire them. So there is something within us that is ready for language. But as I say, it's a whole other philosophical debate. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Or would you be of the view that, as Chomsky puts forward here, the universal grammar, that while it does expand as you have more experiences and have more external stimuli, would you agree that, we are innately prepped to speak a language? So the various aspects of language that constitute grammar. So I'll just outline these, what we actually teach. We teach the sound system, and what that really looks like in practice for us as teachers is, we teach sounds, so we often use those phonemes. We teach intonation. Again, we'll tend to focus on intonation in pragmatic lessons or functional language lessons. But again, it's not just limited to that. We also teach things like connected speech, elision, word stress, sentence stress, all of these aspects of phonology. As I mentioned, we also deal with the system of meaning. Meaning isn't just only a definition that's very restrictive. It's also, as I mentioned, influenced by context. It can also be changed by pronunciation. Intonation carries meaning in it as well. For example, if I were to say to you, Fergus is Irish, or Fergus is Irish. In the first one, there was doubt, it was a question. The second one, it was a more sure statement, but yet the grammar, the construction, the form was exactly the same. Then we can kind of talk about the rules of word formation, or as I mentioned earlier on, morphology. And there are identifiable rules around that, like words which take the suffix ation, often called ation, like information, confirmation. All of those words are nouns. Words which end in ly tend to be, but aren't always, but tend, by the vast majority, tend to be adverbs. So there, we can identify some rules around morphology and word formation. And then the rules around sentence formation. So I mentioned it. Really, this is syntax. Okay, so putting words like although and however at the beginning of a sentence, followed by a comma, and the use of punctuation and use of sentences and phrases, sentences, paragraphs, etc. And then there's also, of course, all of this kind of algebra of language, for want of a better word, is nothing without putting something in for the values of X and Y. And of course, we need the words of the system, or sometimes called the lexicon, or, we can also refer to that as the vocabulary of the language in general. So these are the things that we teach when we teach grammar. So for my question today, before I get to it, please do hit the like button, share, subscribe, and leave a comment below. What is most important for you when teaching grammar? Do you tend to focus more on meaning, form, pronunciation? Do you make sure to spend equal amounts of time on all aspects of the grammatical item you're teaching? Do certain factors within the lesson or from your students impact on that? What's important for you when teaching grammar? Do you have any approach to teaching grammar that has worked for you? Okay, so as usual as well, I just remind you all, you can find me on social media, usual outlets, Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. You can find me on Twitter at Fergus Teacher. Facebook, my page is Integrated Skills. On Instagram, you can find me at Integrated Skills ESL. And if you are interested in a consultation, you can reach out to me by email at fergustrainer@gmail.com. So just the last couple of things to wrap up here. I'm going to talk about 5 key components of teaching grammar. Okay, so we could say, first of all, the context. Context, it needs to be specified. Using sentences in isolation deprives language analysis of their appropriateness within specific situations. So, we can, just as I showed with my example before about how pronunciation and intonation can influence meaning as well. Also, the situation, the context where you are can influence the type of words you choose. The words and even the constructions themselves that you'll tend to use. Usual examples when you're out with your friends or at a business meeting, or at the doctor's office or whatever. They'll tend to be different, and those are influenced by the context themselves. Meaning can be derived not only from the sentence constituents, but also from the speaker or writer's intentions as well. These can be hard to guess from isolated sentences. You may have, if I can put this in real terms, you may have had this situation in your life where, you're texting somebody and they picked it up the wrong way, and then you could feel frustrated by that, and you could say, oh, my meaning doesn't carry across over text, and even if you tried to put the right emojis with it, you may have had difficulty conveying your intention with the language. Conversely, there is this idea of what's called passive aggression. Is basically a definition for passive aggression is when a person tries to shroud their actual intentions with words that don't line up with their intentions. Like if a person says, do you mind if I open the window, and you could say, if you wanna, as opposed to, yeah, if you wanna, sure. And if the first time I say, yeah, if you want, and a person says, well, is there anything wrong? You say, no, I just said if you want to. The intention is different from what they're pretending there, right? Also, moving on then, we could say as well that grammar is more than a sentence. So, definition of grammar focuses on the level of each sentence. That is, you could say the well-formedness of a sentence according to prescriptive grammarians. But like in reality, data would kind of suggest that sentence level grammar does not account for many instances of real communication. So, sometimes if you just focus on a sentence and its construction, you might kind of like miss the elephant in the room. Or maybe that's not the best analogy. Maybe like to use the one I used before, you may not see the wood from the trees. You may not see really how language is being used. And here's what I mean, and this comes from Chomsky again. This will make it a little bit clearer. Like, colorless green ideas sleep furiously. So some sentences can be perfectly grammatical, as that one is. It's perfectly grammatical, but they may convey no meaning at all. Like colorless green ideas. Do ideas have colors? But how can it be colorless if it's green? Colored ideas sleep. What? But like this is correct. The colorless green ideas, that's the subject. We have the adjective order correct. Two adjectives followed by a noun. That makes the subject sleep. Subject plus verb. Furiously plus adverb. Like it's the correct word order. But this example from Chomsky exemplifies this idea that construction itself, it exemplifies this perfectly, that construction itself is not all that's needed. If you only give the rule, you will always be correct if you do subject, verb, adverb, no matter what you put in there. it's, you know, it's not a full and complete picture of what grammar actually is. Grammar needs to convey meaning as well. It's not just form, right? And you know, I myself, in my early days of teaching, could spend long before I was even trained. When I was just trying out some ideas, I could spend a long time just writing constructions on the board. Okay, the present perfect is subject have has plus past participle, and boom, there you go. But I never did any examples or talked about the meaning, and you know, aspects of pronunciation, etc. So you know, this is a way of exemplifying with our colorless green ideas sleep furiously that we do need to cover meaning, form, pronunciation. And you know, grammar is grammar is not absolute and fixed. You know, grammar rules may change not only diachronically through historical linguistic evolution, but also synchronically through dialectical variations. So, you know, it's a lot of terminology there, but basically what it's saying, language. There are those who say language is just this way, and you're wrong if you try and say it any other way. And then there are those who say, well, no, there are no rules, and you can basically do whatever you want. Language is changing all the time. And, you know, that is the definition of what's called an eternal debate. Because if you plant your flag firmly on one side, you can't defeat the other side, you know, whichever side you plant your flag in, because there is some merit to both sides. Like, for example, there are people in Ireland, myself included, who would say very naturally, I'm just after starting this video. And that might sound strange to somebody, but in Ireland, just after means I recently did that thing. Or, you know, it's pretty common as well in Ireland to say, last night I seen a great movie, you know, using the past participle as past simple. And, you know, that is wrong, but it's also right. And, you know, so what to do then? Well, if I'm writing my thesis for university, or if I'm doing my homework for school, I'm going to write, last night I saw a movie. Otherwise, my teacher's going to say, no, you should say, I saw. However, if I'm talking to my friends in Ireland, I'll definitely say, I seen the movie. So there's, you know, there's a bit of both. And, you know, what's the point of me telling you that as well? Like when I'm teaching in Ireland, I let my students know, hey, if you talk to Irish people, you could hear people say, I seen the movie, I done the job. You could hear that. But, you know, learn, I did, I saw. If I'm teaching where I live here in Canada now, I wouldn't, because people don't tend to say, I seen it, or I done it. If you're Canadian and you have another point of view on that, please let me know in the comments below. I still have a lot to learn about my surroundings here. So language is a never-ending, interesting wealth of discovery, I find. Okay, everybody, I will wrap this video up there. I will say to you all, thank you for watching. Please do like, share, subscribe, and, you know, leave a comment below on the questions I've set out today. What's important for you when it comes to teaching grammar? Have I got things right? Any of you people who know about Canadian English, or even your own variants of English for those of you watching in English speaking countries, or those of you who are second language speakers of English and have experience of English in other English speaking countries. Have you noticed any of these kind of variances in language? So, keep focusing on these things. There is no doubt that as long as you stay focused, you're going to gain confidence, you're going to win over more students, and then indeed teach better lessons in the end. You got this one, and we shall see you in the next video.